everyone. I'm Amanda. I'm one of the anatomy and physiology instructors, and I'm going to walk you through the plexes and peripheral nerves for A&P1. So I'm going to use an application called Complete Anatomy, where we're going to go through a couple of the nerves. So we've got the cervical plexus to look at, the brachial plexus to look at, the lumbar plexus, and the sacral plexus. And overall, there's only 6 nerves that you need to know from those that are located in your supplemental lab manual. So if we think about the names of those plexes, we've got the cervical plexus, so that's going to originate up here. Brachial is going to refer to the arm. Lumbar is going to be in the low back. Sacral is going to be down in that sacrum area, because we already know those bones. So in this application, I can move around my skeleton and zoom in. And what we're going to do first is we're going to add one layer of nerves, and that's going to show some exiting nerves. So if we zoom into him a little more, come down and zoom in, we can turn him and see those spinal nerves exiting those intervertebral foramen. And when we look at the cervical plexus is going to be from the C1 through C5 nerves. So C1, let me turn him a little more, C1's way up here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, those are all the cervical vertebrae. And cervical nerves are going to exit typically above the bone so that they're named after. So the C1 nerve, spinal nerve, is right here. C2 is right here. C3, C4, and so on. As we move into the lower part of the cervical vertebrae and into the brachial plexus, we'll actually talk about a nerve called C8, because the cervical nerves exit above their bone. Then C8 actually exits below C7. There is no C8 vertebrae. The C8 nerve exits below C7, and then the thoracic and lumbar and sacral nerves will exit below their named segments. So then T1 will exit below the T1 vertebrae. So if we're looking at the cervical plexus, it's going to originate here. There's one specific nerve, motor nerve, that we're looking at in the cervical plexus, and that is the phrenic nerve. Now, the phrenic nerve has a distinct innervation and motor innervation for the diaphragm. Now, the diaphragm is a muscle that is going to allow breathing to occur. It is, I'm going to zoom out here a little, and I'm going to add in a layer of muscles here so we can actually see where the diaphragm lives. It's an umbrella-shaped muscle here, a dome-shaped muscle, and when it contracts, it actually flattens out, changes the pressure inside the thorax to allow air to rush in, and you'll get a little bit more information about that when you're in the respiratory section. So we could appreciate those cervical nerves exiting, but with that first layer of nerves, they actually didn't give us the phrenic nerve. This second layer of nerves adds a lot of stuff that looks very confusing, but what I want you to focus in on is these yellow lines that are kind of draped over the diaphragm. So we're going to click on him. I knew it was going to click on the diaphragm. I want to click on the nerve. It's a little tougher to click on the nerve. Yes, so that's going to click on the nerve, and it's going to tell us it's the phrenic nerve. So then what I'm going to do is zoom out and work our way up. And we can appreciate that purple nerve coming all the way up, coming from that cervical area. So if I take off that layer of muscles so that we don't have all of that stuff, you can see that purple nerve coming up. So that's the phrenic nerve going to the diaphragm. Next, we're going to look at the brachial plexus, which runs through here. It's in the lower cervical and upper thoracic area. And when I say upper thoracic, T1. So the brachial plexus is going to consist of C5 through C8 and T1. So that's going to be here, and we can see that they start these spinal nerves exit and start braiding together, come through, do some elaborate braiding, and then start wrapping around the arm. They travel under the armpit and into the arm. So that's where sometimes if you've ever walked with crutches and you've leaned on them and put a lot of pressure under your arm, you'll get some numbness and tingling in your hand. So we're going to look at 3 major nerves in the arm, and they're going to be the median nerve, which is going to wrap around and come straight down here, and it's going to come in the midline of the forearm. So if I highlight this median nerve, lets me highlight this median nerve. It gets grumpy when we try to click on little tiny things. So this median nerve is going to come through here, through this area of carpal bones. It's also going to be covered by a ligament on top, and that's actually the carpal tunnel that it travels through. So that carpal tunnel is an area that can get compressed or swollen, and it will compress this nerve and give people numbness and tingling, especially in their thumb, index, and middle finger. It actually does innervate half of their ring finger, but people usually aren't complaining about that. They're talking about these 3 fingers. So that's the median nerve, and it's going to innervate the flexors of the hand. The nerve right next to it is the ulnar nerve. And if we look at the ulnar nerve, let's click on the ulnar nerve. Maybe. Okay, the ulnar nerve is right here, and it actually is located coming off of the brachial plexus, just like the median nerve. It's located on the ulnar side of the forearm, and then it actually tucks in behind the elbow here, and that is in the cubital tunnel. And being tucked in behind that medial portion of the elbow leaves it a little vulnerable to getting whacked, and that's actually your funny bone. So the ulnar nerve will come down on the medial aspect of the forearm, but it really tucks in on the medial aspect of the elbow, and it gets whacked pretty often. The last nerve that we're going to talk about is the in the forearm is the radial nerve, and it's this one here that's wrapping around this highlighted humerus that I have. So if I come in here and I click on this nerve, that is our radial nerve, and our radial nerve is going to innervate the majority of the muscles that extend our arm, our elbow, our forearm, and such. So that's the radial nerve. Okay. So I'm going to bring this guy back home, and we'll talk about the 2 other nerves that we need to discuss, and those are the femoral nerve and the sciatic nerve. The femoral nerve is going to originate in the lumbar plexus, and the lumbar plexus is going to be originating from L1, sometimes T12, but L1 through L4. So if we zoom in here, we've got L5 here, that's the sacrum, so we've got 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So if we look at what's coming out from here, and then we come down, this is the femoral nerve. So the femoral nerve's lying in the anterior aspect of the hip, and that's going to innervate the anterior aspect of the thigh, including the quadriceps muscle. So that's a nerve that we need to be aware of, so that if there's any issue in the quadriceps muscle for weakness or numbness with the skin over top of it, we're going to look at the femoral nerve. This is also an area that they have to be really mindful of when they're doing an anterior hip replacement, because they're going to be coming in right through here, and they have to maneuver around this nerve. The last nerve that we're going to discuss lies on the posterior aspect of the body, and it is going to originate from the sacral plexus, and the sacral plexus is going to come from L4 through S4, so all through here, and it is going to be this big giant nerve here, which is the sciatic nerve, which many of us have heard of, sciatic nerve or sciatica. It's a big nerve. That nerve is probably the size of my thumb. It's a very big nerve, and it is can be problematic because it can have pressure on it from a few different things. And it's going to innervate down the back side of the leg and the entire lower leg. So if we look at muscles, as we add muscles onto the posterior hip, we can actually see that this muscle right here, known as the piriformis muscle, it lies right over top of that sciatic nerve. So that can be problematic because if that is tight or irritated, it can actually put pressure on that sciatic nerve. So to reiterate, the nerves that you need to know are the phrenic nerve, which innervates the diaphragm, the radial nerve, which innervates the posterior aspect of the arm, the median nerve, which runs down the anterior aspect of the arm and is known for carpal tunnel issues, the ulnar nerve, which runs down the medial aspect of the arm and gets caught and is your funny bone, your femoral nerve, which runs on the anterior aspect of your hip and thigh, and your sciatic nerve, which runs in the posterior aspect of your hip, thigh, and lower leg. Okay, have fun.